Welcome everybody to the show. My name is Wes, and today I am doing another art challenge where I am going to do a linoleum block print. So it's Linocut, using a square of linoleum, cutting out the negative space, and then applying ink, and then pressing it onto a paper, or pressing the paper onto the ink, and getting a print. This is obviously going to be an alligator, and I'm just kind of drawing it directly onto the print. Kind of doing a seat of the pants thing here. I'm not too concerned with the outcome. I'm just doing my best. I've done this a couple of other times. You'll see some examples at the end. I went ahead and printed 2 older Linocuts I've done. But this one I didn't. In fact, the amount of planning, I didn't even think about the fact that it's going to be mirrored later. And if I wanted it to look, with the head on the right side, then I should have done it on the left. I should have carved it in on the left. But it didn't really matter. So it wasn't until towards the end I was like, oh yeah, this is all going to be reversed once I print it. Which is it's obvious for whoever does printmaking, but not doing it that often myself, I don't, it's just not something I thought about. Another thing I didn't think through as much as I should have is the one kind of important thing with Linocuts or woodblock prints or any kind of carving type prints is you really have to decide ahead of time what's going to be printed and what's going to be left as negative space. Because that's all you're working with the whole time. So if you have areas where the foreground and the background are similar values, you kind of have to make a decision to change one, because otherwise you will not see it. I mean, you could do a contour line, but oftentimes that comes off as too simplistic. Just kind of depends on the style you're going for. I should mention that, again, not an expert at this. This is why it's an art challenge, because it's just something different. So everything I'm saying is just kind of from a common sense point of view. I'm using a knife with a bunch of different scooped blades designed for this application. I think it's probably X-Acto brand, but I'm not sure. But I use 2 different blades. One, a thinner one that I start with here, and then once I start cutting out more of the background to leave the negative space, I realize I should switch to a larger blade, and so that's what I did later. And the good news is no, cuts. I didn't, no injuries. I was very careful. So yeah, I didn't plan it a lot ahead of time. Kind of as I started the head, I just kind of made a decision. Okay, I'm going to, leave most of the head dark and the background's going to be light. I'm starting off by just cutting out the outline and then putting some texture on the, on the head, just to create, the form a little bit, the texture of the reptilian skin. Figured that was important to do. And then just, as you can see, kind of cutting away all the excess, which again, later I changed to a larger blade, so it's a little easier. Again, here the body's going to also be dark against lighter water. So I'm just going ahead and kind of tracing around the outer edge. of the pencil lines. And then on the interior, I'm just kind of using these little suggested lines as just to throw in some of those ridges that the alligators have. Just little indications of it. Here's the larger blade. It's more of a, big gouge. Even as I was cutting this out, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep the lines in the water, but ultimately I did. Although it bothers me a little that I didn't have them consistent throughout. There's a gap that I left in one part just below the tail that bothers me. But not that much because, again, this is kind of just for fun and for the challenge. What I really liked about Linocut is, and I'm assuming I'm saying that correct, Linocut, maybe it's Linocut, I don't know. What I really liked about it though is it goes quick because it's, very easy to cut into the soft or semi-soft, surface with these sharp blades. You kind of lose yourself in it like a lot of art forms, and so, you can spend, I actually don't know how long it took me, maybe 30 minutes all told, maybe closer to 45 minutes, not long. It's quick enough to where it leaves you plenty of time to redo it if you want to, or alter the print. Alter the linoleum. Shaping up nicely. Coming up on the little ridges of the tail. That turned out well enough too. I didn't really put a lot of effort into the drawing of that. I just kind of left it loose. In the photograph, the water is very reflective, and so you have this, instead of the triangle shapes you would normally get from the tail sticking out from the ridges of the tail, you get, diamond shapes because it's reflected underneath. So not something I would have thought about if I wasn't looking at a photo or starting with the photo. This is where that big gap in the water comes into play, which is because I'm, using this big gouge to cut out these negative spaces between the tail ridges and the shadows. I wasn't paying attention to where the water goes. Again, that would have been solved a little better if I had done a more detailed drawing ahead of time. I kind of gouged through the linoleum there it's got kind of a cloth backing that I cut through too, which isn't a big deal. In fact, if I wasn't going to do the ridges, I probably would have cut out a lot of these just with a blade, just, cut through the entire linoleum to save me all this time. But I think leaving the lines in the water is good. It's good to have that texture, that pattern. And there's kind of the final thing. Just using an old sketchbook that had these thick, glossy pages, so I knew the ink wouldn't leak through, so I'm using ink designed for this, and I used kind of that roller to roll it on there, and a spoon to kind of press it into all the places. This first time I didn't press down enough, and so got some splotchiness. And the second one I got a little better at it. And I just saw this from a video online of somebody else doing it using a spoon, so I figured, well, that must be a good way to go. And the paper I'm using is just from a sketch pad, a drawing pad. The last time I did this, I used a watercolor paper, which wasn't a problem, except this one was kind of the normal watercolor paper with too much texture, so you can get a clean print. And here's a photo of the alligator along with the crawfish and some cypress trees that I've done in the past, so I went ahead and printed those off as well with the same paper and everything. It turned out well. I enjoyed the process, and I probably will keep going and do more of these in the future. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it yourself. Give it a try. Linocut, Linoprint, whatever it's called. Have a good one. Bye.